God says, stand where he stands. Then take one single step forward, never backward. He has laid a firm cornerstone at the exact place where your foot hesitates now, and that solid stone is not behind you. It is one single pace ahead of where you finally stopped. Not the ground you just came from, not the quiet safety of the room you left, not the path of those crowds who turned right around. When the rushing river got loud, let's stay in this hour together. Before these words finish, God is going to show you exactly why the deep longing to retreat has felt so spiritual when it really never was. And he is going to place right in your mouth a single, simple sentence he once handed to an old man on the muddy bank of a river he did not want to cross. A message that will finally steady the foot you have kept lifted up, completely ready to flee. For far too long now, the Almighty has never asked you to go back. He has asked you to push forward. He sees you clearly. The constant looking over your shoulder has become a rigid posture in the body, not just a movement of the eyes. He watches a wife who left a long, bitter marriage that was quietly destroying her. She keeps glancing backward at the kitchen she walked out of, because that very kitchen felt deeply familiar even when the space was cruel. He spots a son who finally said no to a parent's harsh manipulation and has been sleeping terribly ever since then. He knows the no is the right answer, and that boundary is also painfully lonely. A young student quit a college degree that felt wrong for her, at the heavy cost of 2 years of tuition. Now she walks right past the campus on errands, pulled by the heavy gravity of what she has already paid for. An older man bravely stepped out of a friendship circle that had spent time mocking what mattered to him the most. We see his phone is quieter now, and the watch as silence begins to argue with him. The earthly father finally turned away from the bottle, his hands trembling in the fading late afternoon, yet the bottle still remembered his exact address. None of those doorways ever closed cleanly as the Holy Book said they would. Where someone exits, leaves a deep track inside them, a beaten path their feet still knew by heart, a way back that was never truly home, a comfort that brought no real comfort, but felt at least familiar. That track is real. The strong pull along the path is real. None of that pull is hidden from the Almighty. The Lord had been walking the new road one pace ahead of the traveler, looking back over his shoulder at the heavy foot they had not yet decided to set down. No heavenly impatience rises in the Creator over how slowly that foot has stepped forward. Something much gentler rises instead. Patience of a loving father whose child has walked across a freezing pond before and lost a sister to the cracking ice, and now must cross a totally different pond decades later, and finds their entire body vividly remembering the wrong pond. Hesitation right here is wise, but hesitation here is also no longer accurate. The frozen pond in front of them is not the pond. Left behind, water under their cautious feet today is not the water that swallowed someone they deeply loved on a distant day. God is the clear difference between those two dark waters, and the Almighty asks their body to learn that difference by stepping forward boldly into the second one with his divine hand at their elbow. We know there's a heavier weight under this hesitation than the icy surface admits. A quiet, haunting shame had been settling in around how often the anxious voice inside their chest says, "Go back just for a season, just until things calm down." A subtle whisper of failure clings heavily to their thought of returning, because deep down they know the return is never a strategic retreat. It is the ancient gravity of a familiar, smaller existence pulling them away from a frighteningly vast destiny. Every one of those earthly weights has been measured. They are not human character flaws. They remain the natural response of a creation asked to cross deep waters for the very first time in adult life. Mortals are entirely right to fear the water, yet that fear does not need to win. Let us pause and watch them press the bruised, the reebly for sole of one foot flat against the earth under their seat, leaning a small fraction of their weight into it. Just 1 foot, feeling that sacred push back from the ground. The exact firmness they put down returns to them. That divine resistance is not in their imagination. The earth replies to a foot the moment a foot finally arrives. It never auditions the traveler. It does not judge the choices they are about to make. It simply faithfully replies. Their body knows this where their mortal mind has completely forgotten. They take a slow breath, letting the soul rest there for 2 quiet, holy beats. Honest ground is rare in this life. We see them sitting upon it right now. The ground of their next step will be honest too. Their deep urge to turn around did not arrive within their weary spirit from nowhere. Their inner child long ago learned that the safest earthly move when facing a painful trial was simply retreating to a known sanctuary, to wait there until the darkness grew bored and drifted entirely elsewhere. That mortal strategy worked in childhood. It spared them from many bruises. A child cannot fight a giant, overwhelming problem. So, quiet withdrawal was the only human wisdom, but their strategy fused somewhere deep inside the rooms of their childhood to the belief that every difficult moment is best handled by running away. Now, their adult life has been quietly running the exact strategy of a child. Long after that child has grown up, an adult cornered by a hard season is not a child facing angry parents. The adult has choices the child simply lacked. They can actually step forward now. Let us be clear, those teachers were not God. A few of them loved the child and were simply shielding a fragile body with the only tools they had. Others used the child's habit of retreating to keep them available for pure convenience. Both kinds of sources produced the exact same flawed instinct that stepping backward was God's desired response to fear. And that instinct has been costing them precious years. Let's watch them set it down now, tilting it face down on the small table nearby, as the Creator explains what actually moving forward in divine company truly looks like, and why pushing straight through is the path home instead of fleeing from it. Somewhere deep inside their early years, a very quiet theology took deep root, a belief, confusing obedience with escape. The strict religion handed down to them claimed the boldest move was the patient one, that being patient meant being totally quiet, and that remaining quiet meant being completely still, and that stillness meant never stepping anywhere at all. An entire generation of faithful souls learned a type of waiting that looks exactly the same from the outside as standing frozen on the wrong shore. We see them absorb this lesson like bodies absorb anything repeated often enough. Running away began to feel like devotion, and never crossing over started feeling like trust. You and I know He never taught that. That was never the lesson the Father gave. The picture of obedience you have been carrying deep inside your ribs, a folded, armed believer waiting beside the river for the water to dry up before stepping in, was painted by hands that were not His. Some of those hands surely meant well. They were protecting you from the bitter disappointment of simply moving forward into water that did not part the way the old stories promised it would. Others used that picture to keep you small, because a believer who never crosses a river is a believer who never grows beyond the reach of those who already control them. Both sources produced the exact same false portrait, and that very image has cost you so many crossings. Let us set that picture aside. He is the kind of Father where true obedience looks like forward motion, not endless paralysis. In seasons when bold movement is what the exact moment requires, obedience is not always perfect stillness. Sometimes obedience is lifting a foot. Sometimes obedience is a body crossing rough water it never chose to be near. Sometimes obedience is the long walk forward into the room you have been dodging because that space is hard. The room is unknown. It belongs to a new chapter you cannot yet read. The disciples He has used most have rarely been the followers who managed to stay in one safe village their entire lives. They have been the faithful ones whose feet kept finding the next square of ground He lit for them, even when that next step was past a stretch of dark water. Let us picture an old man standing by the Jordan River in flood season. He was around 80, His mentor had perished on a mountain just 1 week earlier. The grief was entirely unfinished. The crowd behind him was a generation that had never known a different leader. Brown water swollen deafening. Absolutely no bridge, 0 boats, just a divine plan to walk in. A long stretch passed before a single foot moved. A perfectly familiar wilderness sat directly behind him. It was known daily, manageable, led by another man who had carried the heavy weight of every hard decision for 40 long years. To step in meant leaving the only home a younger version of himself had ever truly known. To step into those waters meant leading, without the man who had taught him exactly how to faithfully follow. The Almighty let that silence stretch until the deep longing to retreat grew unmistakable inside the man. Only then did the Lord draw close in the morning. The same sentence you and I are about to unpack together right now. This is exactly what God said in Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be fiercely strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, and absolutely do not be dismayed. For the Lord your God is always with you wherever you go. Let's move through it slowly together. There is far more life living inside this divine sentence than a fast reading will ever let you reach. Read that opening phrase first. Truly notice its form. A simple question is the shape of it, but no genuine question is actually being asked. It is the kind a father asks his son when the boy already knows the answer perfectly and has been pretending not to. Gentle in tone, yet firm in the floor underneath. The Lord implies you already knew what he asked. Not knowing has simply never been the obstacle. Wanting to be commanded once again in a softer voice is really just wanting God to negotiate the terms. Wanting the Almighty to admit that the original calling was perhaps just a misunderstanding. We cannot misunderstand this. His command is still standing. He is only making sure you remember it before you step. Just be strong. Notice the verb, do not find your strength. Do not generate it alone. Just be strong. Strength is already inside you, or on its way, or held safely in God's hand, in the exact amount you will need the very second your plant's foot hits the water. His instruction here is not to manufacture that courage from an empty kist. His instruction is to inhabit the strength he has already placed within your reach. A son does not strain to be his father's son. He simply is. Being it is how you access it. Be strong the way a son simply is, and courageous. We must remember strong and courageous are not the same word. Strength means capacity. Courage is the willingness to use it. In the presence of fear, a strong person might still refuse to step. A courageous person steps with that strength fully visible to themselves, and steps anyway. Rivers are not crossed by sheer strength alone. Rivers are crossed by the willingness to bring that strength to the edge and use it. Courage bridges the gap between the muscle and the action. So do not be frightened. Read it just as he spoke it without raising his voice. It is never a scold. It is a father's gentle hand placed softly over the shaking shoulder of his son. Fear will arrive at the riverbank. Fear is allowed. Fear is not a disqualification here. So remember, his rule isn't to feel zero fear. His divine instruction is to refuse to be governed by fear. We can feel afraid and still cross over. Many of the absolute bravest souls who ever walked God's roads were terrified every single mile. They simply never turned back. A trembling foot that keeps pressing onward is the foot he calls truly courageous. An unafraid foot that remains safely on the riverbank is no foot the Almighty ever celebrates. He says, do not be dismayed. Listen to that second command. Dismay is a close cousin to fear, but they are not identical twins. Fear is a natural response to visible danger ahead. Dismay is a slow leak deep inside the chest, when a threat has lingered far too long, and the exhausted body begins to read the length of the struggle as proof of God's absence. Dismay is exactly what happens to fear after long weeks of silent waiting. Dismay whispers, I am alone in this. Dismay says, if he were here, the water would have parted already. You and I face dismay at every spiritual river. The Lord names them both because he knew both would eventually arrive. Because the Lord our God is truly with us. Focus entirely on that word with, not hovering above, just looking down, not standing behind, quietly supervising, not miles ahead, simply beckoning from a distance, but with us, shoulder to shoulder, foot right beside foot, in the exact same water we are, bravely stepping into. God did not stand on the distant bank back then and just wait to see if that old leader would make it. His holy ark went straight into the river with the great priests resting squarely in the middle of the riverbed, while the entire nation crossed over, walking right past on dry ground. His presence stayed in the water with the people. He wasn't safe on dry land waiting for them to arrive. You and I know the promise this verse is talking about. That exact same presence waits in the water of your very next step. The Almighty isn't standing on the distant edge of the Frisons, the room you're so terrified to step into. He is already inside that room, waiting right at the elbow of the future version of you. Your crossing is never solo. It's never been a solo journey. Your hesitation makes you treat all this like some brutal path you have to walk alone. Stick with me here. There's never been one single chapter of your life God sent you into without him walking there first. Wherever you go, those final words of the Forson, sentence, it doesn't just mean on this specific crossing, or wherever you might wander this coming year. Wherever you go for eternity, every single river, every room, every season after this one, his faithful promise doesn't expire at the distant shoreline. It stretches ahead to whatever bank arrives next. That water ahead of you isn't the final obstacle. More rivers will rise, and other rooms will appear. That same divine presence holding strong this hour holds for all of them. God's promise is totally portable. It journeys forward, just as he told one of his children through a different prophet. When you pass through the rising waters, he will be with you, and the rivers absolutely won't overwhelm you. The vivid imagery remains exactly the same here. That water never magically vanishes. The crossing is real. The crossing is held. The river does not become a meadow just because God is present. The river remains a river. The faithful walk through it without being ruined by the current. That's the difference between God's promise and the guarantees people might have heard from other worldly voices. The Almighty never promises the absence of the river. He promises the holy presence that survives the entire crossing. Let's revisit the question we started off with. We noted earlier that the urge to retreat often felt deeply spiritual when it truly wasn't. Here is the real answer. Why? It's because no one ever explained in language the bravest human body could grasp that pushing through is true obedience. Because a childhood church, or perhaps even the family during early formation, taught a type of patience that always looked exactly like standing frozen on the wrong bank. Because a frightened child who originally learned to retreat from danger never got the real chance to learn a higher wisdom, knowing that some hardships are simply not meant to be avoided forever. They are truly meant to be walked into with God's steps right beside theirs, until a distant shore rises beneath them both. Water at the edge of a person's life isn't divine punishment. That water is the crossing. A distant bank isn't just theoretical. That opposite shore is the next chapter of who someone actually becomes when they have done the exact thing they have been postponing for too many years. God hasn't asked anyone to go back into the spiritual wilderness. The Lord asks the faithful to go through the river. That river is the road home. Turning back was always the long way around. So here is a small truth we can carry into the natural rhythm of our week. Big life crossings are rarely accomplished in one massive leap. Pretending otherwise just sets us up. Let us witness how fragile souls falter there and decide the entire journey was a mistake. Yet true progress happens in tiny, repeated steps each day until the flesh masters this new path. The Almighty reveals 2 beats. Beat 1. The Spirit names the shoreline aloud, speaking whatever truth. The silent room allows. The soul stands at the edge of a heavy conversation they keep avoiding with their brother. They hover at the brink of that application they refuse to send out. The spirit lingers at the edge of the boundary they keep failing to set with a friend who drains them. They stand frozen at the precipice of an apology owed their daughter. Let us name the dark water. Rivers left nameless swell larger in the human mind than they truly are. Naming them shrinks the terror to scale. Beat 2. The soul breathes, taking a slow breath in through the nose. At the peak of the inhale, they hold 1 count, then release outward, slow, stretching longer than the air drawn in. A held breath is the flesh, eternally waiting on the shore. An exhaled breath is the first plunge into the deep. Each exhale is a minor miracle the body can manage now, and the fragile vessel must practice this endlessly before the massive, turbulent trials stop looking utterly impossible. Every single held and released breath is a quiet rehearsal of the faithful motion. The rest of their earthly life must finally learn. If divine truth reaches the exact shore where a human foot stands hesitant today, they leave the word forward in the comments below. Not a catchphrase, but a holy flag planted on the new earth they have bravely stepped onto. Visay, pinned above this video, 7 short letters prepared for the seeker, sent each dawn across their coming 7 days, delivered straight to their inbox. The very instant their quiet yes turns the latch, they receive this gentler third movement, perfect for days when the earth feels far too loud. After holding and then releasing their breath, we watch them take 1 literal step, moving the physical body 1 pace in any direction. 1 pace toward the door, another pace toward the chair. That specific person they have been avoiding is going to sit there. Apache, toward the phone they have purposefully not been picking up. A pace into the kitchen. Even when there is no clear destination, their human body must register that motion is still possible. Movement teaches the inside of them what absolute stillness has been hiding from their soul for years. They learn the floor does not crack under a single solitary step. It holds. It will hold firm under the next step too. Their very first attempt might register as almost nothing. A 10th try may still feel entirely like ritual. A foot that has been lifted, ready to run for many long seasons, does not land all at once. After roughly 30 tries, though, that lifted foot drops a 1/4 inch on its own. After 50, they catch themselves in the middle of a heavy week, with both feet firmly on the new riverbank for several minutes before they even notice they have arrived. After 100 friends walking near them begin saying, "You have changed this season." Much steadier, less quick to retreat, far more inclined to stay inside the room where the difficult conversation is happening. And explanations slip away from them because nothing about this inner change was something they actively constructed. We see what changed is the bank they finally let. Let's witness God speak to the one who left a marriage that quietly broke their innocent children, and who constantly second guesses that departure for agonizing months. He commands them to listen. The shore they fled was never their true homeland. Their homeland is that distant bank they have not stopped staring back at. He says, "Stop looking back." The children are watching to see if that exit was real. They must set their face forward. Glancing over the shoulder was never divine obedience. That look over the shoulder is just the old gravity. The riverbank ahead is what God built entirely for their family. He also watches the person who left a career that paid the bills but slowly devoured their precious years. This new space feels uncomfortable. Their life savings are dwindling. The internal doubt screams loudly. We need to remember this too. Doubt isn't the final verdict. That doubt is the natural reaction of a mind that has been taught for decades that ultimate stability lives inside a paycheck. True stability lives in the holy presence of the Creator who walks with them wherever they go. A paycheck is a helpful financial tool. It isn't the real bank. God is the bank. Walk forward. His divine provision requires stepping forward into the water, not shrinking back into that familiar chair they just escaped. God speaks to the parent of an adult child whose troubled path has terrified them, and whose desperate first instinct, every blank, the morning has been calling that grown child back to the family kitchen to rescue the child from their own crossing. We must hear closely. That child faces their own river. Parents do not get to cross it for them. That turning back they have been quietly negotiating in their own head is not love. It is the old gravity of always being needed. They must look forward, walk their own bank. The parent prays for their child from the far side, never from the shore where they cannot grow up. The young will cross whenever they are ready. Their task is not being the heavy rope behind them. A parent's true role is being one of the voices on the distant bank cheering loudly when they arrive. Let's look at the soul who has been cleaned from an addiction, the glass bottle, the pill, the screen, the toxic relationship that was stealing pieces of them, and who has been hearing that old familiar temptation in the late afternoon, that dark voice whispering just one, just this single time, just to recall how it all used to feel. The divine whispers gently, that temptation is just the gravity of the bank behind them. It is not an enemy. It is certainly not a friend either. It is a current that wants to drag a person back into a river that nearly drowned them. God says, stand where he is standing, not trapped behind, not staring at the bottle. Just one brave step forward. The difficult afternoon will pass. That temptation will fade away. The very next afternoon will feel somewhat easier. Sobriety is built on 1,000 small footsteps, not one grand parade, and they have already walked most of them. Now for the soul who escaped from a rigid religion that was always using pure fear as the front door, a theology that taught believers of a smaller God who demanded strict, flawless obedience just to remain interested in them. And that survivor has never been able to walk into any church since, strictly because the buildings still reek of that heavy cage. Let's remember this too. Their spiritual journey is not about a particular church building. They are actually stepping into a wider room of who the Creator truly is. They shouldn't let the bitter disappointment of one flawed teacher convince them the entire house is exactly the same. That wider room reveals a Father who has been patiently waiting for them this entire stretch. They can take their absolute time. They do not have to force themselves into a church building this Sunday. We must let go of the idea that the door is the exact same one that hurt you. God's door is different. His door has always been different. His door opens. Many of his most cherished sons and daughters spent years wandering between the cage and the wider room before they could finally trust either was real. The waiting in between is never a failure. It is simply the time a soul requires to learn the feel of that new room. Take whatever amount of time you need. For those of you walking right now through a season of rare comfort, bills paid, your body cooperating, family at peace. Let's hear this final note from him together today. Comfort becomes its own kind of bank. A long rest on that comfortable bank can quietly convince the soul that river crossings are for other people entirely. They are not. A small crossing is waiting for you right now. A kindness you have not yet extended. A conversation you have not started yet. A calling you have been putting off. Because that comfortable bank has just been so pleasant. The same grace that holds for the frightened one is offering itself to the comfortable spirit too. Move forward. The far bank is always wider than a comfortable one. You will not regret the crossing. Many of the believers who later spoke about God with the most authority were people who left a comfortable bank long before any storm forced them to move. Their crossing was voluntary. That was also the chapter that truly grew them. Yours can be exactly that too. Let's keep his words with us one more time. Just the way a friend repeats a true sentence right at the door before stepping back out into the dark evening. God has never asked you to go backwards. He has only asked you to push through. The faithful carry that one divine truth into their coming days. We've seen someone carry a small lamp down a long corridor. They whisper it at the sink, pressing it gently against their chest when old Broblick gravity tries pulling their feet backward again. His promise stays true whether or not the river ahead of them parts on their desired timeline. The journey through becomes the obedience. His holy presence is their company. The far shore is real. Amen. If today's message caught the weary soul in quiet hesitation, 7 short letters sit already prepared for them in the pinned comment below. 1 each dawn across their next 7 days. Delivered to their inbox the moment a quiet yes turns the lock. They should receive them, forwarding this video to another standing at their own riverbank, looking backward when God meant them to face forward. They can subscribe so his next word arrives before that old gravity speaks up first. You and I know this crossing was never walked alone.